My fellow entrepreneurs, welcome to this week's episode of the Consciouspreneur Journal. This is Ahmed, and from all of us here at VOE, we want to wish you a really wonderful holiday season. This time of the year is a great time for reflection, reflecting on what has worked and not worked over the course of the last year. But there's something that many of us forget to evaluate, and that is, did we enjoy our time along this journey? Or did we feel that our lives were enhanced as a result? Or instead of doing that, did we get consumed by what did not work and beat ourselves over it? I wanted to bring you something powerful to think about, as you may have some time to reflect during this time of the year, and talk about our thoughts and how they significantly can affect the quality of our lives. So for this week's Consciouspreneur Journal, I decided to do something different. I invited a phenomenal mindset coach and a good friend, Shenan Charania, to discuss the perception of thought, and more importantly, how we perceive thought that can help us defeat the negative spiral that our incessant thinking can keep us in. There is a common perception that thoughts are what control our behavior. So it makes sense that controlling our thought process should be the key to altering our behavior. But before we can do that, it is crucial to understand how thought works. Shenan and I dive deeper in this very fascinating subject of how we think about our thoughts, which may be the key to unlocking some of the mysteries of the mind. Some of the things we discuss are: what is thought and how it can be seen as a collective energy? How do most people perceive thought? And how can changing your perception of thought help you live a more fulfilling life while reducing stress and anxiety that has become so prevalent in the entrepreneurial world? Before we start, my friend, I have a quick announcement to make. I am proud to say that we are launching our second masterclass on how to spread your message as a quiet leader without the need to be loud. My friend and a very successful quiet leadership coach, Faris Khalife, who works exclusively with introverts in helping them find their voice. So starting mid-January, which is a great time to get some real accountability behind your goals for 2018. Faris and I will be taking all the lessons that we've learned and are continuously learning in growing our communities and businesses to teach you a system that works in getting you aligned with your mission and getting you closer to those goals. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the masterclass in the break, but if you're interested, then check out the course page at introvertleader.voebeheard.com to learn more about the content and start dates. Also join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/voice of the entrepreneur to join a growing community of entrepreneurs where some really valuable conversations are happening that is sure to make you feel like you belong with people that understand what you're going through. Alright, so I met Shenan a few years ago, and he was the first guest on my podcast, but since then, he has grown his business significantly, and I think the reason for that is because he has mastered the art of helping his clients maneuver around how they see their thoughts, and in general, their thinking process. I've had first-hand experience of being able to manifest a reality that I desire by shifting my perspective on my thought process by first understanding how my thoughts create my reality. You will see in this conversation how Shenan and I will dissect this seemingly complex topic to help reveal something that would hopefully shift your own perspective. I invite you to the Facebook group if you have any questions around anything we speak of on this conversation. I'd say listen to the parts that resonate with you a few times and discuss the implications that could have in your own life. Well, we are sitting here with Shenan Charania, and you, my man, are one of the first guests I had on this podcast, and started the VOE journey, if you will, with you, and we're back here together. But today's conversation is a little bit different from what I usually have with my guests, and that is, it's not an interview style where we're talking about your success and how you've been able to achieve that. We've already had that conversation. And what I want to do today with you, Shenan, is really dive into the perception of thought and what is thought and how it affects or relates with success. And how do people show up in their lives, and how can they be successful, or how they have a lack of success based on the way that they see themselves or see their thinking. So that's kind of what I want to wrestle to the ground now and really dive deep into what it means what thought is and how does it relate to us. So talk a little bit about what thought is in the first place.
So to me, I've come to see that obviously all of us are thinking beings, right? That's how we create our world, is what kind of projection we are having through thought. And that gives us a perspective on the reality and shapes our reality moment to moment to moment to moment. It could be very wavy within like 10 minutes. I could have a very insecure reality that I'm creating with the thinking that I'm doing. And 10 minutes later, I could be full of delight and joy and happy and grounded. And why that is, or why that would happen, as far as I can see it, is because our thinking changes moment to moment. So how does that relate to, people creating the reality and how successful they are, and how does thought relate to that? To me, it relates to success and business and anything to do with life and every aspect of life, because it is the fundamental variable between everything. And because people don't see it, or the reason I should say people don't see it, is because it's an immeasurable thing, right? So science hasn't been able to measure it because it's invisible, it's immeasurable, and it's a variable that misses everyone. So the example that I use often with my clients is, if I'm going hiking, for example, or I'm walking on a trail somewhere, and I trip over a stick and I fall, it's very, very obvious and likely for me to go, it was me and the stick that caused the fall. But if we really look at it, it was gravity that caused the fall, right? That variable has to be there in order for me to fall. But because it's so common, it's in everyone's life, it's a constant truth on this planet, gravity, we don't consider it. We're just so used to it because we're born into it. Well, thought is the same way. We're not considering it because we're so used to it. We're born into it, and every single person has access to it. But it's a constant truth about life. It's not a belief. It's not a concept. It's a truth. Everyone thinks. And so what most people miss, and what I've missed for years, and I continue to miss when I get caught up, is that when we're not paying attention to what's creating our reality, we're more likely to be fooled by it being created from somewhere else. So, it looks like the outside world is creating our reality. Oh my God, this circumstance is happening. I should do this about that. It's making me feel this way. Oh, that event made me feel this way, so I should react that way.
Right.
But what we're missing is that event is an event, or the circumstance is a circumstance, and our thinking about it is what's going to cause our feelings. So just like gravity is the middle variable between me and my fall, me and the stick and the fall, thinking is the variable between the event and how I react to it. So I'm not reacting to the event. I'm not reacting to the circumstance. I'm reacting to my thinking about my circumstance. And why that's important, when we start to really see that we are moment to moment reacting to whatever state of mind we're in by the thinking that's creating that state of mind, we're able to play it a little more in a grounded way. We're able to stay with reality more, and we're able to make better decisions because we're not being influenced by the event, but rather influenced by the thinking that we're doing about the event. Right? So if I have some really distorted thinking about the event, I might want to hang out in a clear space and let my mind settle before I react to it.
Yeah, so when you think about it that way, again, this is thought, thinking of thought. So we are, it's like a kind of like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so the example you used of gravity, that's a great example because it's always in the background. And just like that, thought and thinking is always in the background. Yet gravity is something we cannot control, and thought we can. So is that the real difference? Is that it's the way that we see thought and how we allow it or disallow it to control us is what creates our reality?
How I see it is thought is something we cannot actually control, but we can control how we react. And why I say that is because a lot of what the teachings are out there is based on the misunderstanding that we can position our thoughts and, control our thoughts so we can have more positive and less negative.
Right.
Now, to go a little bit deeper into that, or a step back, if you will, is if we look at thought, I would say how I've come to see thought is an energy that's available to everyone. It's an invisible energy.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking is when it becomes personal. So that's the distinction I would create. Is thought is something that's available to everyone, but we can use thought and create some thinking out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can get an insecure thought and I can go, oh my God, that's a really important thought. Let me create more thinking about how to become less insecure. What do I do about this? And I've turned it into this circular stale thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And now it looks like I'm controlling it, but what I'm really doing is adding more thinking to it. But I'm not controlling thought. I'm controlling how my reaction to thought is. Now, the second point to make is, why can't we control it? I've had people ask me, well, I've been able to control my thought.
Yeah.
And if you really look at it, it's like, well, you cannot control what you did not invent, right? And as a human race, we have not invented thought. We're born into it. So it's kind of like saying, I don't like these leaves on the tree and I like those ones, so I'm going to change these leaves to make it look like these ones. And we can't do that because we didn't invent trees. So, using that as a metaphor, coming back to thought, is when we can truly see that we cannot control thoughts, but we control how we react, we start to take our thinking less seriously. And that's when we're available to be engaged with reality more and more, and with our thinking less and less. Because most of us, ruminate on the thinking, trying to manipulate the reality in front of us.
One of the metaphors that comes into mind when you talk about thought and how it's available to us all, yet thinking is something different that we do with it. The metaphor that comes into mind is like free-flowing water that's available to everyone. But there's many ways to using it. You can create a dam and create this massive force of water that will push against something that eventually will break the dam. Or you can use the water and divert it into a field to fertilize your plants or your crops and use it that way. So you're not really controlling the water, you're just controlling the flow of it, or you're controlling how it is manipulated in some way. Maybe that's not the best word, but it's really, that's what you're doing. So if that's the case, if we can control, or if we can manipulate thought the way that we can perhaps manipulate water, what should we do? Should we build dams, or should we push it out to fields and harvest our crops? And what does that look like in terms of the way that we conduct our day-to-day lives?
I mean, great example, by the way, because it's the same. It's like we didn't invent water, but we can use water in so many ways. And how I would describe is that you can direct water the way you want it to. Right? So it's the same thing with thought. It's like you didn't invent it, you can't control it, but you can direct it. So if I have a great idea, I want to direct that into action and so on. And if I have a really insecure thought, I don't want to try and change it, because that will just cause me to think more about the insecure thought. And the second thing is, and when I say insecure, it could be stressful and anxious, anything. The second thing is, when I'm trying to get out of an insecure state of mind, my best ideas are coming from an insecure mind, right? So I have a distorted state of mind, and I'm trying to find ideas on how to get out of a distorted state of mind. So my best idea is garbage at that point.
Wait, you're saying that you're trying to fix a problem from the state of that problem, and that's why there's no, okay.
Exactly. And so that's why it's no use for me to fight that. But most of us do it innocently, because we don't understand that it's just thought. It's not real. You're not actually insecure. You're just having an insecure thought. And so when we leave it alone, it starts to fade, because as everyone has experienced, nature of thought is to fade. You don't have the same thoughts you did at 7 a.m. versus now. So leaving it alone will have it fade. And if you like the thought, if it's a great idea, if it's giving you a good feeling, you might want to direct it your way, because that's in your power. And the more we can do it that way, the more we can create our reality by the thoughts that we direct. So the more we understand it, the more we will obviously choose the ones that we like and create our reality that way.
Guys, I wanted to take a quick break and discuss a little bit more the Quiet Leadership Masterclass that's starting in January 2018. I have partnered up with Faris Khalife, a leading quiet leadership coach, to deliver this masterclass and co-host it myself. The last one we did was really successful. We had over 25 quiet leaders that participated, giving us the chance to serve them. And we know they got a lot out of the masterclass because they shared some incredible changes that they were seeing in their own lives. I wanted to give you a quick rundown of what you will learn in the masterclass. So here we go. Week 1, the topic will be Uncover, which will help you understand who you are, your personality traits, your values, strengths, and your why. Week 2 is about Creating. By uncovering what is true and unique about you from week 1, you will learn how to create the message that reflects your authentic self and speaks to your audience and/or community. Week 3 will be all about Communicating. At this stage of the masterclass, you will be clear on who you are, your message, and your audience. Now you will learn how you can communicate your message effectively to your community. And finally, week 4 will be all about growing your brand and your business by learning strategies that work to grow your community organically and spread your message more effectively. So if you consider yourself a quiet leader who is looking to spread your message, get clarity on who you are, grow your brand and your business, then check out the course page at introvertleader.voebeheard.com to learn more about the content and start dates. You know, you said something interesting that, let's say, if you're getting a thought that you're insecure, you're not really insecure is what you were saying. Now, thoughts create our emotions, and emotions make us feel the way we do. Isn't that the thought that we've had, that I am insecure, that I'm feeling insecure, actually makes me insecure? Like, how do you make that distinction between a thought of being insecure, and I'm just using insecure as an example, and that person, let's take my example, or anyone actually being insecure? Like, what is the distinction? How can you say that the thought and you, who you are, really is not the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how I see it is that our mind has the potential to bring in thought moment to moment, and all of them can be fresh. So we have the potential to have a completely fresh experience the next moment from the current one we're having. Right? So if I'm insecure by 5 p.m., I'm sure those levels are going to be different. I might still be insecure, but it's not going to be at the same level.
And is that a matter of choice? Just to interject and add this point in here, you know?
Yeah, so it could be a matter of choice. So this is how I would explain it. If we don't understand that it's a thought, we're going to try and do something about it because it looks real to us. And at that point, when we're trying to do something about it, all we're doing is hanging on to it, so it doesn't leave.
Right.
So it's a choice that's misused, right? We're misusing our free will to go, ooh, I have this insecure feeling right now. How do I get rid of it? Oh, it's not going anywhere. How do I try this? It's not going anywhere. So I'm choosing to hang on to it. But if I can understand that it is a thought that I'm having, it's not like me, then it's likely to leave faster if I don't mess around with it, because that's something that I didn't invent and I can't mess around with it anyway. To answer your question, how do I know if I'm not really insecure and it's just a thought? Number one, to understand how thought works. Now that's where most people I see struggle with, because they want to understand how their thinking works instead of how thought works. And when we're looking at the whole nature of thought, ours is included in it, but you're actually looking at the entire experience being created by this energy of thought. And therefore, you're not looking at your individual experience, but you will understand your individual experience as a byproduct. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second one is, when I look at my own life and I look at times when I'm insecure and times I'm fearful and times I'm doubtful and so on, I can really see that those levels change. It's not like I'm fearful at this level all day, every day. In fact, my experience changes, but if I don't know what's creating it, then I might go, oh yeah, I'm scared about that. You should be scared about that. Don't you remember you were scared about that? And then I'll go back to it. And the levels will climb. But it only happens when I think about it. Right? So if I'm really insecure and I see a child playing with a balloon, my attention is going to be changed. I'm going to be paying attention to the child with the balloon, and my state of mind will change. I'm not going to be insecure in that moment. But because we don't realize that, and we think that, oh, I'm still insecure, but I'm just distracted. No, it's the other way around. You were distracted by the insecure thought. You took it to heart and thought it was you, because it is compelling. It feels real. Your senses come alive from that thought. Your perspective shifts because of the thought, and we start to believe the thought, and that's when it starts impacting us. Understanding how thought works takes care of that, to understand, okay, I'm having an insecure thought. That's okay. It's called being human. We'll get over it.
Yeah, I want to bring up an example from my own life of this very thing that we just talked about insecurity in the moment. So in my events, the one that you have been part of, Shenan, when I went on stage, just before that, maybe throughout the day, I kept having these insecure thoughts that said, I'm not good enough, that people won't be listening to me, or, what have you. There are several thoughts that go into the mind at that moment. Yet, when I was on stage, when I got in front of people, none of those thoughts were there anymore. And that's a very interesting phenomenon, because at that point, when I was in the moment, if you will, those thoughts did not matter. They didn't have that power over me. And in fact, I enjoyed the moment as if I was really living it without my insecurities. So that's a great point, because you're right. If you were to see a child playing with a balloon, at that moment, you lose yourself and do not see that you're insecure, or do not feel that you're insecure. So by definition, you're not insecure.
Yeah, so to understand thought, it's important to understand the mind as well, and how the mind does give us thoughts moment to moment. Right? So if I'm seeing a child playing balloon, it doesn't mean that I've forgotten about my insecurity and it's still there. It actually means that the moment has changed.
Right.
Now we have the choice to hang on to the past moment and go, remember I was insecure 10 minutes ago. I can't forget that. I got to do something about that tonight or tomorrow or something. Now I'm choosing to misuse this gift of thought that we have by hanging on to the last moment. When clearly another one's presenting itself in front of me and I'm choosing not to participate in it. And that comes from an innocent misunderstanding. Nobody does that intentionally, but we just don't understand that the insecurity was a thought and I'm going to hang on to it and try to fix it. Another way to look at it is, how insecure are you moment to moment and day to day? If you really believe you're an insecure person and you believe that it's not a thought, it's you, then I would invite people to look at what their levels of insecurity is day to day, and they'll start to see that it's not the same. And that gives you evidence to go, hey, if it's not the same, can it really be me? Because something that fades can't be you, because if it was you, you'd fade as well. Right? So we are that space in which the thoughts and emotions occur, but we take them to heart and think that's us, and then we try going on this energy trip of, spending all this effort to try and change it. And that takes away energy from life. That takes away energy from our dreams. That takes away energy from being present and connected with the person in front of you. So there's something you're saving to solve later when it doesn't need to be solved.
Interesting. Very interesting. Let's dissect this a little bit, Shenan, with the example of being insecure in the moment. And again, insecurity is just one example, but an emotion that is triggered by a thought. So in the heat of the moment, when you experience a certain thought and an emotion comes in and you feel either anxious, insecure, what have you, whatever emotion you're feeling, what at that moment, because it's easy, when we're talking like this, it's easy to think about thought and to have some sort of an idea around it. But in the heat of the moment, just like it happens when you see a child and you let go of your insecurity, just like that, when you are in the moment of feeling insecure, anxious, and all those emotions, you don't have power over the moment when you're in there. How can we be aware of that? And then how is it that we can switch the way that we perceive that thought in the moment? Because that's where it counts at the end of the day.
Not a very popular answer that people like to hear, but I have found that the best way to do that is to leave it alone. And why I say that is because, number one, if you're insecure, anxious, stressed out, fearful, doubtful, whatever else, whatever ideas you come up with are going to be from that state. right? So it's kind of like what Alan Watts talks about. You can't bite your own teeth.
Mm.
So in that same sense, we're using thought to change thought. You can't bite your own teeth. You can't change thought with your own thought. The best way to do anything about it is to leave it alone. Why most people don't do that is because they are scared of the experience thought creates, because they think it's real. They don't see it's a thought.
Mm.
So if I'm really fearful about something, I'll start going into a panic state. My heart rate will jump. My emotions are alive. My perspective shrinks and shifts. And I'm going, oh my God, I got to get out of this state. This is really uncomfortable.
Right.
Whatever idea I come up with from that state is not going to be helpful. It's going to actually get me deeper into it. Because now I'm turning the thinking into circular thinking and adding more thinking to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can leave it alone, it will self-correct itself. And the fearful thought will subside, and eventually it will leave. Why most people don't leave it alone is because they don't understand how the system works. Right? If we can understand that thought is an energy, it's not personal, it's something that everyone has access to, it's not only mine, and we are turning the thought into thinking. If I can really understand that, then I won't automatically, what my common sense will tell me is, oh, that is just thought. I have completely misused it in this moment, and now I'm in this state. Okay, now I can leave it alone. Continuously looking to understand the system will help us understand how serious or unserious the thought we're having in the moment.
So when you say how we need to understand the system, or how much energy we put in understanding the system, how can we understand the system? I mean, having conversations like these are great. If someone is listening, then they will understand the system a little bit more. But how do you, on your own time, continuously evolve your understanding of thought and be able to have a much more evolved sense of how you perceive thought, so that you can be able to not wrestle it every time a thought comes into your mind? What can we do on our own times?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's many resources out there that I have found really helpful. So one of them is the 3 principles, which is a community. It's a model of the mind, which really points to mind, consciousness, and thought. Those are the 3 principles that explain how the human experience and the system works.
Right.
So that's one resource. Others are different truth teachers, from different Indian spiritual teachers to Korean, Japanese, Eastern religion and tradition talk about this a lot. And what they're really pointing to is, and people like, Robert Adams, Mooji, and there's a spiritual aspect to it, because I know that people I've talked to, they go, oh, spiritual, well, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about business. Well, it's really important to understand that you are a human being, and if you want to talk about business, the business runs well only if the human runs well. So yes, it's very beneficial to learn about business and the skills and the strategies and the techniques and systems and programs. But if the human behind it is not grounded, the business is going to be a reflection of that. Right. So that's why most of my work, if not all of it, is always pointing back to how grounded are you, and how do you see yourself, and how much do you know about yourself? Because that's going to reflect in your relationships and business. So all the teachers that I've named really just point to the fact that there is a unencumbered potential of the mind that provides thought moment to moment. And if you can see that you are the mind more than the thought, you will identify less with the thought and more with the mind, which is the space where thoughts come in. And consciousness really just explains how you are aware of the thought you're having, right? So I can have an insecure thought, but I won't know I'm insecure until it comes into my consciousness, and consciousness tells me I'm aware now, right? So consciousness basically tells you that the thought, it brings to life the thought that you're having. So thought comes into consciousness, and then your perspectives, your senses, your emotions, they will all come alive because of that. So many teachers out there, it's really important for me to understand that not to get stuck on what the teachers are saying, but what they're pointing to. All of it is just a metaphor pointing to the actual facts of life that every single person has access to, That's why they're called facts, because they're truths that everyone has access to. It's not concepts or beliefs that some people can use and others don't. We're all using it. Some of us know we're using it, some of us don't. So, to pull a full circle on that, I would bring it back to how gravity is and how we can't control gravity. We can't control the amount of pressure it provides, but we can direct it. And that's why we have aviation as a human race, and we have other things we use gravity for. But that's a constant truth. Whether you believe it or not, it works. Whether you're sleeping or not, it works. Whether you know about it or not, it works. Whether you're conscious of it or not, it works. And so there's a system behind the human experience that's exactly like that, which is true all the time, and it's always constant. And the more we can know about it, the less scared we become of the experience we're having. Then that helps in everything from connection to business to relationships.
My fellow Consciouspreneur, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Consciouspreneur Journal with Shenan. If you did, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes, because every single rating helps grow this community and allows us to have a greater share of the footprint we leave on this world as conscious entrepreneurs. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so you don't miss out on the really awesome guests that we have lined up in the upcoming weeks. And of course, check out the Facebook group at facebook.com/voice of the entrepreneur and participate in some of the discussions that are happening in that group that can really benefit you and your business move forward. Until I see you again next time, have a great one, my friend.